Good evening.
Good evening and welcome to the CASAA update for the week of 1/25/2016. So what's new and exciting this week, Alex?
Excuse me.
Okay.
Let's see where to start. I think I'm looking at my timeline here on Florida, just as a follow-up. We've updated the blogs, and
Yes.
I sort of assume that most people in Florida are paying attention to this. But the House Bill 1143 sailed as predicted through the first committee hearing. Yeah, that's that. That was Nobody should be surprised by that. That was pretty much what everybody expected to happen. There are two more committee hearings after this.
Yes.
And as I understand it, some of the Florida advocates, Kevin Skipper and FSFA, I believe, are going to be working on offering their own amendments to the bill. So we'll be following that and see where that goes. And then on Tuesday, New Jersey Governor Christie vetoed a pair of bills that would have raised the age for purchasing all tobacco products and electronic cigarettes to 21. The age
That
to
was
purchase.
a surprise. That was a surprise. That was a big surprise that he vetoed it. Really?
It was a little bit, but I did see, I think, an NBC or MSNBC, somebody put out a story about how much tobacco lobbying money he had accepted or something in 2014. I can't remember exactly the details on it.
Right.
But Christie is also, he had proposed in his budget in 2013 the e-cigarette tax.
Yeah.
And eventually that got left out of the budget, I think. Part of that had to do with some of the testimony that they received, I think, in the finance committee hearings or the budget committee hearings. And also, I think he realized that it was sort of poorly thought out.
Yeah.
So wouldn't necessarily put Christie in the friend of the vapors category. He also sort of blamed the legislature for sending him tons and tons of bills at the last, at the end of the year for him to sign. And
Right.
I think he just looked at that and said, this is outrageous. And I think I don't know if rubber stamp veto is a term, but I think he just vetoed a lot of things because he was fed up.
Probably.
But yeah, I mean, that's good news, I think, for young adults in New Jersey who have switched to vapor products. And unfortunately, since that, actually, it might have been before, I'm not going to waste time and look it up, but there is another bill that was introduced for this session that would raise the age. So I'm trying to, there was an email about it.
So tobacco 21 is just the new dance craze.
Absolutely. I just saw an alert about it. I think it's SB359. Let me see.
And, the nice thing is he's not just going to be upsetting vapors. He's going to be upsetting people that switch to snus or smokeless products or any of that.
I don't think upsetting is quite the word. I think putting their lives at risk is probably a better.
Well, I mean,
structure.
yeah, well, he's also infantilizing people that can, make adult decisions in every other way are not allowed to be exposed to tobacco, which is just kind of ridiculous in any form.
Yeah.
So,
Senate Bill 359. This has been introduced by Senator Richard Cody. This was actually introduced, referred to the Senate Health, Human Services, and Senior Citizens Committee on January 12th. There was a hearing scheduled today, but we have feet of snow on the ground, and I'm pretty sure that most lawmakers are shoveling their driveways or perhaps their entire neighborhood
Probably.
today. So yeah, there's a lot of places that are not accessible in the Northeast corridor right now. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, governments all over the I-95 corridor are shut down today. In fact, for the entire day, the city where I live, the heavy equipment was out loading the snow up onto dump trucks to take it away. I live across the street from a middle school, so our neighborhood tends to get priority.
That's kind of nice.
Yeah, but enough about my snow story. So anyway, yeah, Tobacco 21 is the new dance craze. I'm seeing these bills pop up all over the place. And, you know, we're still, I think, trying to feel out CASAA. We're still trying to kind of feel out how to approach this stuff. I mean, obviously, we're talking about, you know, my perspective on this is obviously we're talking about adults who are going into this as smokers. And this is essentially taking away low-risk, smoke-free alternatives from them. And, you know, even after they jack up the age, cigarettes are still going to be the easiest things for them to get their hands on. And, you know, if you're between the ages of 18 and 21, there's really nothing, you know, there's no law that says you can't smoke. You know, it's not like raising the alcohol age to 21, where, you know, if you're caught drinking under the age of 21, there are penalties. So, you know, it's a half measure. It's a half measure, and it's not likely to produce the results that they would like to claim. Now, as long as vaping is still out there, you know, and vapor stores are prolific, and all the wonderful products are on the shelves, we'll still see a decline in smoking rates, likely due to people switching to vapor products. And so in the wake of these policies, all the anti-smoking people can claim victory because smoking rates will continue to decline, probably, or I mean, fingers crossed, you know. Hawaii, I think, will be a good test for this. And certainly, you know, I don't know how far down the data goes on specific municipalities from year to year with smoking rates, but you know, we already have. I can't remember if it was a study or, you know, how good the study was, but there was something that came out late last year regarding, you know, strict enforcement of no sales to minors actually increases smokes. Strict enforcement of no sales to minors for electronic cigarettes actually contributes to a rise in smoking rates amongst that age group. So I would be curious to see if similar data doesn't emerge with all this Tobacco 21 nonsense. So yeah, several states have this. I'm not going to list everybody. I don't have everything in a list in front of me, but just be aware that if you live in a state that begins with a letter and is in the United States, there's a strong possibility that Tobacco 21 laws are coming to your neighborhood, especially if you live in Massachusetts. I know Washington State is looking at a Tobacco 21 bill, and I think there's a couple of other things going on in Washington State. I'm not entirely clear with what's going on there. I just know that there's some action. But a little further north, Alaska is looking at some exciting bills. I think one of them might, let me just double check here. I have the wrong things open. Well, we'll start with Alaska. So Alaska has, I don't think it has a companion bill yet. But oops, that's the wrong place to go. Alaska is looking at, let's just look at Alaska. Sorry, I'm getting familiar with this new tracking software, so just bear with me while I click through the steps here.
Yeah.
It's actually probably quicker than the spreadsheet I had last year. So as far as I can tell, there is one bill in Alaska regarding taxes. By the way, the Indoor Clean Air Act bills, I believe that was SB1 and AB40 or HB40. I forget which one's in the Senate, which one's in the House. But those have carried over, and I think are still, active for what it's worth. They didn't move a whole lot last year, so who knows what that'll end up being. But the thing to look out for in Alaska, and again, the tax threats are super important and absolutely a threat everywhere because states are scrambling to get money.
Right.
And I don't exactly know the budget woes of Alaska, but everybody needs money. So Alaska is looking at a 100% wholesale tax.
Ooh.
Yeah. That is SB 133.
You just said 100%, right?
Yes.
I did say 100% wholesale tax.
Yeah. 100% of whatever the wholesale price is would be your tax for your device or your liquids.
I have to just look at this again.
Okay.
If this...
I do know...
It's electronic smoking devices, so this would be... I don't know what the wholesale price is of a high-end mod, but just, double that.
Right. Well, I mean, they did stop their, how the people who live there got an oil payment from the oil companies for living in Alaska. They stopped that, and they're talking about instituting for the first time a state tax, a state income tax, not a sales tax.
Okay.
So I think their woes are pretty big.
Yeah.
Well, and how can Alaska be broke? That's what I don't get.
Have you looked at gas prices lately? That's how Alaska can be broke. Alaska can be broke because of the Middle East. And they're not stopping pumping. But I digress. Yeah. Alaska.
No, actually, in that vein, a topic of discussion around our house is how Canada's doing. And the Canadian dollar, I believe, is down to 55 cents on the American dollar. And that's because the previous Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, basically based the economy around the tar sands, and the oil production in Canada. So, everybody who's heavily invested in that, I think, is hurting pretty hard.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's Alaska, and don't have a hearing date on this yet, but people can look forward to a call to action on that, I'm sure, at some point, possibly soon. The other thing that I promised to get back to everyone on was this is a carryover year for a lot of states.
Right.
So we have a lot of states that have shorter sessions, the lightning round kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And this moves on to New Mexico. New Mexico has a 30-day legislative session this year, which means things might move rather quickly. But we have two tax bills in New Mexico. One is absolutely outrageous, and I don't see that going very far. That would be SB4. This is 4 cents per milligram of nicotine, not milligram per milliliter, per milligram in the bottle. So I did some quick math on a bottle of e-liquid that I might buy, which would be 30 milliliters of 24 milligram.
Right.
That would jack up the cost by over $28 just on the tax. For some brands, that is more than double the cost of the retail cost of the bottle.
Right.
In addition to that, there's a labeling requirement in that bill that would require listing the total content of nicotine in the bottle. Which, again, this sort of falls in that like kind of ridiculous requirements. I'm sure somebody thinks that that's significant, and I also, it's kind of one of those required to scare people things.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't present any useful information to the consumer. Nobody really. I mean, I guess if you're contemplating consuming 700 some odd milligrams of nicotine, you want to know that, I guess, but it's kind of, it's irrelevant at that point. I mean, if that's what your plans are for the day, I don't think having that posted on the bottle is really going to make a difference. So that's just kind of an aside of a little bit of ridiculousness there. I think there's also some licensing in there too, but again, it's such an outrageous tax. I can't imagine anybody actually supporting that once they find out what that means. The other,
but they don't really ever find out what that means, Alex. That's the problem. Is the people that are passing laws regulating us don't even understand what it is that they're agreeing to.
I think Washington State was one of the first ones that had language like this, if I remember correctly, and they had a certain cent per milligram tax, and advocates there got in front of them and said, "This is you might be thinking about the little number on the bottle that says 18 milligrams per milliliter." In terms, you might just be thinking about that little number, but really you have to consider the per milliliter bit there. So take that tax times the amount of milligrams times the amount of milliliters in the bottle, and that's what you're talking about. So I in some cases, I think it is just an issue where people don't actually understand the measurements. But who knows with New Mexico? So. Hopefully someone in New Mexico breaks out a calculator and lets them know what's going on here. But there is another tax bill, SB77. This is new. This was introduced. This is pre-filed legislation, I believe. And this is a 65% excise tax. Again, I don't have a hearing for that or anything, but 65% certainly appears to be more reasonable than 4 cents per milligram of nicotine. So not a real option there anyway, but so New Mexico looking at 2 tax bills this year and 30-day session. I guess what we've got, let's see, when is the 18th? The 18th is a Thursday, and that'll be 3 weeks from this Thursday. So we got a little over 3 weeks left in New Mexico's legislative session for this year.
Okay.
Moving right along. I think we already talked about Maine the other week, but this is not. So the Maine tax bill, LD 973. I guess we should probably just clear this up just in case. So, according to some legislative procedure, Article 330 or something like that, this was placed in the legislative file or the Senate file or House file, something like that. It was filed somewhere. And essentially, in the tracking program that we use, in parentheses, it says dead. But don't be fooled by that. Again, we saw this last year a couple of times where people were celebrating that bills died, or, the sponsor walked away from a bill or this and that. And then a couple months later, it just comes back out of the blue. So
resurgence of the zombie bills. It can always happen.
Even though the state legislature page says dead, there's still some procedural magic that can happen, however unlikely. In order to bring it out of this file in the basement where it is, 2/3 of the House has to agree to revive it. Again, however improbable, still not impossible. So I've updated that to say the bill is not currently a threat, but people in Maine should still be aware of the tax threat, and by all means take the opportunity to contact your lawmakers and educate them about vapor products. And if you're feeling particularly inspired with gratitude, send them a thank you note for not taxing vapor products. People love thank you notes.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. What else do we got? Oh, yes, Virginia does have, Washington does have a tobacco 21 bill. Just looking through my files. I didn't do a legislative preview this year because it was kind of unclear as to, last year whenever you have kind of a brand new session, you're going to get a lot of pre-filed legislation. This year we didn't see a whole lot of pre-filed legislation. I'm pretty sure the New Mexico tax bill was the only pre-filed bill that I saw, before January. So a lot of this stuff is carried over. But just looking at taxes, we talked about Alaska, Hawaii. I have 2 tax bills there. I think this bill in Iowa, I don't know if that carries over or not, so I don't think that's actually a threat. Kentucky and West Virginia. I don't have a bill yet for West Virginia, as far as I know, but this is going to be something for people to follow because the governor is looking again to raise some revenues. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're swimming in it this year.
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah. Everybody wants money, and everybody thinks an easy way to do it is to tax vapor products, but I think they're finding out that the math makes it really hard. There's no way to standardize that and make it a reasonable tax and a reasonable moneymaker for the state. Reasonable for the people to pay and reasonable for the state to collect revenue on. It's just not performing the way they had hoped. Maybe that'll discourage future legislative sessions, please.
Yeah. One other little bit, I haven't gotten around to issuing a local call to action for this yet. This bit of lawmaking magic is still in the... I guess in the editing phase. There's a little town in Vermont called Ludlow, and I spent some time during the blizzard watching a recording of a planning commission hearing. The planning commission hearing takes place in what I imagine is sort of a multi-purpose activity room in what used to be a storefront on the main street of Ludlow, Vermont. Small town. I'm sure it's very cute and a pleasant place to be. But they are looking at prohibiting vapor retail shops in their community. And I bring this up because I was actually contacted by somebody writing an article about this, is how I found out about it. The discussion goes from let's talk about this ordinance prohibiting a vapor retail shop to, well, Vermont's going to be legalizing the marijuanas, right?
Right.
And it's just one of those very bright examples of how, as the drug war winds down and states are becoming more permissive about marijuana in particular, that the prohibitionists, I'm pretty sure there's a gene at some point that makes a prohibitionist. They are looking for other things to go after, and so nicotine is the next logical target. And so I really kind of just wanted to bring that point up. I don't want to talk too long about it because we're already coming up at the 30-minute mark here, but just once again, a lot of these policy people, we all know this. I'm preaching to the choir here, but this has very little to do with public health and substantially more to do with lifestyle choices, or I don't know, just generally stuff that you want to do in your leisure time. It's and of course more to do with prohibition and control. These are people that
they're the new Puritans is what they are.
That's the word I was looking for. Puritans.
Yep.
So yeah, nicotine in their eyes is deviant behavior, and I will say, just so it's out there in the ether, as a recovering alcoholic and addict myself, I do take a little bit of issue with people that want to demonize addiction and throw that word around like it's some sort of communicable disease. So,
Well, I mean, most policies written by these people they're people who've never experienced addiction in their lives and have no idea what it really means. I mean, I think if you were to talk about nicotine, you might want to talk about maybe, I think it's a little bit of dependence, but I think a little bit of dependence is a lot different than an addiction. And it's a shame that they don't understand the real difference between the two.
I anybody who's hung out with Carl for any amount of time, I think you might end up questioning. I sort of ended up questioning whether I've actually experienced addiction, and I've been through inpatient treatment for it. So, what we actually what we understand about the brain and what we understand about things like addiction is developing, and it's actually somewhat small in comparison to other areas of biology and science and so on. So I think in general, I think people, I hope that eventually people come to a more broader consensus that what we understand about addiction is really just beginning to learn, I think, some very important details about it.
Oh, yeah.
As far, in terms of treatment and prevention and so on. And when people start talking about how nicotine is the most addictive substance on the planet, the little bells and whistles should be going off in your brain. That person is just parroting things that they've heard over and over again. There's really not much substance behind that. In fact, I was reading a photo posted on Twitter from somebody in the UK earlier, and things that a lot of vapors who have really dug into this issue understand that, we have we have tons of studies that were done on nicotine replacement therapy to talk about, to understand whether or not these products would work. And of course, they established that the addiction liability or abuse liability with nicotine alone type products was actually remarkably low. So it's, it really is concerning. It should concern everybody, not just smokers, not just vapors, but the way that these public health advocates, I can't even say that without feeling weird.
Air quotes. Air quotes.
The air quote public health advocates are throwing the magical properties of nicotine around is really distorting the public's understanding of science. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%. And they're distorting it to ensure that they still have a job, I think, more than they care about you or they care about your health.
Yeah.
That's the other thing to, I think about when you read these statements.
And then, of course, the really scary ones are the ones that actually believe it.
Yeah. Well, I think the scary one, the true believers are scary, but what's scarier is what percent of these people would still say and do these things without a paycheck. Also something to consider. So, does that seem like it's about it tonight, Alex?
I think that will wrap it up. If I missed anything, I'll be sure to bring it up next time. I had this thought in my head that I had a bunch of links that I wanted to just mention so that we would link to them in the description. But no, I think that does it for this week.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for everything you do for us, and we'll see you next Monday.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Night.
Bye.